Hello, everybody. This is a criminal procedure topic, prosecutor selection of system, and it's linked to Chapter 3, Part B4b of the Miller and Wright text. Now, we've already seen that the prosecutor really is in control of the in-out decision. Are you going to decline charges altogether or bring this person into the criminal system? The prosecutor controls that declination or diversion option. Similarly, the prosecutor has a lot of control over which court system is going to process the claim if the prosecution decides to go forward. So for instance, state and federal prosecutors might sit down and decide, all right, this one's going to go to federal court, that one's going to go to state. Just as important, a state prosecutor might decide, all right, for defendants or suspects who are less than 18 years old, their matter sometimes can be processed in the adult courts, the adult criminal courts, or sometimes it might be handled in the specialized juvenile justice system. The prosecutor is a key player in deciding which of those two systems is going to be working on the case. Unlike other settings where the prosecutor really is acting alone, in this setting, judges have a little bit more to say about the question, but prosecutors are still very influential on this choice between the adult or the juvenile system. So let's take a closer look. Now, you read a report from the National Center for Juvenile Justice that describes the different mechanisms that we use for assigning a case to either the adult or the juvenile system. We see pictured here Dr. Melissa Sickman, one of the authors of this report. At any rate, the different mechanisms you could think of as invoking primarily judicial power or prosecutorial power or the power of the legislature, so the three different branches of government. For judicial waiver, typically the case is starting in juvenile court, but then the prosecutor might ask the judge to, quote, waive the case into adult court. Sometimes there are statutes that tell the judge that waiver is presumed for juveniles if they're old enough, or for crimes if they're serious enough, or particularly if you have a combination of an older juvenile who committed or who's charged with committing a more serious crime. Now, prosecutorial placement or prosecutorial discretion has been a growing mechanism. And in this kind of setting, sometimes called concurrent jurisdiction, the case could go to either place, either to juvenile system or the adult system, and the prosecutor gets to decide which one to choose as an initial matter. Again, the juvenile might might ask the court to push them back into juvenile court, but the prosecutor is given the initial placement, and typically there's some kind of presumptive power that goes with that initial placement, and it's to some degree or another hard to move out of that original choice. How do these different placement mechanisms play out in the Christy Maddox case from Arkansas? Well, you remember the story. Christy was 17 years old. She's riding along in a red pickup truck. She and her young friends are playing adolescent cat and mouse game with another car on the road, who is a woman who is driving her elderly parents to the VA hospital. This other driver ultimately slows down to 2 miles per hour waiting for the truck to pass them, but of course they don't. They're just out doing what children in cars do. So ultimately, Christy and her friends blow by in the truck. She's being held out the passenger window by her belt loops, and she throws a glass bottle of, I love this, Mountain Dew in Arkansas at the moving vehicle. It causes about $800 worth of damage to the car. Nobody's hurt, but still, very dangerous situation. question becomes, where will we process this potential charge of criminal mischief? Court later says it could have even been something more serious like aggravated assault. But at any rate, we have the question, which system, juvenile system or adult criminal system for Christy Maddox? Now, Maddox was looking here for a reverse waiver. Her case started in adult court. She was charged by information with criminal mischief in the first degree. And so she was trying to show that there was no clear and convincing evidence to retain her case in adult court. She could do that perhaps by showing that the crime wasn't serious enough, or by showing that she didn't use violence in committing that crime, or that there were enough prospects in her character and background to think that rehabilitation was a serious possibility. The juvenile system is, of course, designed more to effectuate rehabilitation than the adult system is. The trial court denied her motion to move back to the juvenile system, reviewing the factors under the statute, section 927-318E, under the state code, and concluded that the crime here, just as a category, was serious. It's a Class C felony. And the court notes they had heard of somebody in Oklahoma who had died in a situation like this, and so concluded that throwing a Mountain Dew bottle is, carrying out this serious offense with violence. And then the court said, we didn't hear evidence one way or the other about rehabilitation, so deny your motion to go back to juvenile court. Plus, the court observes, you've already turned 18, so if we send you back to juvenile court, they're not going to have any ongoing authority over you, so we would be left without any really effective remedy. The appellate court, that is here the Supreme Court of Arkansas, agrees on all counts. A few interesting things about all of this upheaval in the juvenile justice assignment system. Over time, prosecutors have been given more authority to place the case into adult or juvenile systems, and the various presumptions have been set up to make it easier to put certain serious crimes into the adult system. With all of this tinkering with the presumptions and the authority for placement, we still get really powerful inertia here. We really have very few cases that end up in adult court before these changes to the mechanisms, and it stays that way even after the prosecutors get more power and more presumptions are set up for the adult handling of these cases. By and large, the juvenile systems still retain authority over the lion's share of these cases. It's also true that in making the assignment decision, juvenile judges and adult court judges, for reverse waiver purposes, follow the lead of prosecutors, and together they do stress the seriousness of the offense that's been charged, along with the defendant's prior record. Now, another choice between systems is the choice between the federal and the state system. There's an enormous body of cases that could be handled in either system. Pretty much any case involving narcotics, technically either the federal or the state courts could have jurisdiction over the case. Number of cases involving firearms, and just lots of large categories of cases could go either way. How do you decide? Well, you don't really have to decide. You could go through both systems simultaneously, but that's generally considered a waste of time and resources. So you choose on the front end. By and large, the feds take the big cases, the states take the little cases, but that's a gross overgeneralization. What we can say is that prosecutors and law enforcement officers consult with one another to decide which direction to route a given case. And one thing that's on their mind is very often there's a large penalty gap between the federal and the state system. Typically these days, the federal penalties are much more severe, particularly for narcotics cases. And so the big fish tend to get routed toward federal court. But some of it just turns on the particulars of a particular jurisdiction. The agents might get together once every month or two to, meet on their joint task force for this or for that. And so I've listed here several of the types of joint task forces that you might find. When I stroll around the country, these things come and go as different U.S. attorneys and district attorneys take office. Just turns on the nature of the relationship and how often they get on the phone with each other and how regularly they want to meet. So these are very fluid structures for sorting out the cases, but they have big impact on the potential penalty that defendants face. So with that, we've covered the outlines anyway of the prosecutor's influence over the court system that will process criminal charges once the prosecutors decided to go forward with some cases. So on we go.